I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who started keeping track of dresses. But that night I did. We were at a private dining room in one of those upscale steakhouses downtown, dim lighting, white tablecloths, enough glassware to confuse anyone without a sommelier certification. It was the CEO's birthday, a corporate event that felt more like a networking chessboard than a celebration. Everyone from regional VPs to junior analysts was there, dressed to impress and working the room like it was part of their bonus structure. I'd been seated at the far end of the table next to a couple of dry HR managers and a marketing guy who kept showing me pictures of his rescue dog like we were close friends. I remember glancing at my watch. She was late. Not by much, just 15 minutes or so, but late enough to make people look toward the door when it opened. And that's when Jenna walked in. The room shifted. It really did. Conversations dipped just slightly. Eyes tracked her without shame. She gave that half-smile of hers, the one that said she noticed the attention but was pretending not to. She waved at someone near the center of the table, then began making her way toward me. I hadn't seen that dress before, and I definitely would have remembered. Deep emerald green, sleeveless, just a shade tighter than necessary. It was elegant, but in a way that left nothing to chance. She looked composed. Like someone stepping into a movie scene she knew she'd already won. I managed to smile, but my stomach was already tightening. And then it hit me, the memory dropped like a stone. 3 nights ago, I'd been in bed, scrolling half-interested through my phone while Jenna packed for her business trip. It was some hotel conference thing, a brand strategy summit in Milwaukee, or at least that's what the calendar said. She kissed me on the forehead and told me not to wait up the next night because there'd be a team happy hour. Later that evening, while lying in bed, I was flipping through Instagram stories. I stopped on a short reel posted by one of Jenna's coworkers, Paige, I think. It was quick and blurry, just 5 seconds, but enough. The camera panned across a cocktail lounge with gold lighting and soft jazz in the background. And there, in the middle of it, was Jenna. The same dress. The same green. She was holding a drink and laughing with a man I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized I'd seen him before, months ago, in an old Facebook photo she showed me. "That's Chris," she had said casually. "Old friend from New York. We interned together when I was in college." I remembered the way she'd mentioned him, fond but neutral. A name said in passing like a footnote. But in the video, they weren't acting like footnotes. She was leaning in close, head tilted, hand brushing his shoulder like they were in their own little gravity field. He smiled at her like he'd memorized the shape of her laugh. I watched it a few times, the unease sitting in my chest like a slow leak. I brought it up the next morning. Not directly, I never seemed to know how to bring things up directly with Jenna anymore. I was at the kitchen counter sipping coffee when I asked, "So, how was the cocktail hour?" I think I saw a clip of it on Paige's story. She didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that," she said, zipping up her work bag. "Yeah, team tradition. Just drinks after the panel. Nothing exciting." I nodded. She kissed me on the cheek, smiled, and left for the day. But the way she answered? It wasn't casual. It was prepared. Like a script. Like she'd already anticipated the question. And now here she was, sliding into her seat at this dinner, laughing like nothing was off. She didn't say anything about being late. No apology, no excuse, just kissed me lightly and whispered, "Sorry, traffic," before turning her attention to the wine menu. I don't know how long I stared at her after that. I tried not to let it show. I sipped my drink, nodded at something the HR guy was saying about corporate wellness programs, but my mind was swimming. The rest of the night passed in strange little fragments. Jenna charmed everyone at the table, like always. She toasted the CEO, made a well-timed joke about office politics that got a laugh, and complimented the server's pronunciation of the wine list. She was magnetic. She always had been. But now I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. When the desserts arrived, someone stood to give a final toast. I think it was the regional director from Minneapolis. I don't remember a single word he said, just that while he was talking, Jenna raised her glass and smiled at me. Not the full smile. The small one. Tight-lipped. Just a hint of mischief. Like something unspoken was hanging between us. Or maybe that was just my paranoia projecting itself onto her lips. But here's the thing, I've known Jenna long enough to read her moods. And lately, there's been this distance. A hollowing out of routine. She keeps her phone face down all the time now. Says it's a habit. But it wasn't before. And she takes it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. I don't remember when that started, just that one day I noticed, and now I can't unnotice it. She used to toss it on the couch or forget it in the car. Not anymore. And then there are the other details, the ones I tried not to collect but did anyway. The perfume she only wears on business trips. The way she started losing earrings that I later found wedged under her car seat. A receipt for a rooftop bar in New York during a trip she swore was strictly in office. I remember finding a lingerie tag in her coat pocket once. The kind with gold foil and cursive branding. When I asked about it, she laughed and said it was a gift she'd bought for a friend's bridal shower. I didn't even know she had a bridal shower coming up, but I let it go. Because I wanted to believe her. But all of those little details came rushing back that night in that restaurant as she lifted her glass to toast someone else's life while carefully protecting her own secrets. I watched her eyes as they scanned the room. She looked relaxed, even proud. And I wondered who else knew. Was I the only one out of the loop? Or was I just the last to catch on? After dinner, while waiting for the valet, she wrapped her arm around mine like nothing had changed. I forced a smile, let her talk about the dessert, the wine, how good the CEO's wife looked in red. I nodded and laughed at the right spots, but my mind was still stuck on the dress. The one I never saw hanging in our closet. I tried to forget the dress. I told myself maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe she really had bought it last minute and just didn't think to mention it. Maybe the guy from the video, Chris, was just an old friend. Maybe I was making too much out of nothing. But that kind of logic only holds up when you're not lying awake at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling, replaying every strange moment from the last few months like scenes from a slow-burn thriller. And once you start connecting dots, it becomes impossible to stop. I don't know when exactly Jenna became a stranger to me. It wasn't one big event, more like a bunch of small withdrawals from our shared life, until one day I woke up and realized I was holding an account that had been emptied out without my knowing. She stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. Not entirely, but the casual, unconscious kind disappeared. I'd get a distracted "see you later" while she typed furiously on her phone, always angled just enough to keep the screen hidden. Her passcode changed too. She used to type it in without thinking, barely glancing down. Now she cupped the screen like a gambler hiding cards. I remember the first time I really noticed it a few weeks before that dinner. We were grabbing takeout, and while we waited for our order, her phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Rapid fire. She didn't flinch. Just slid it into her bag without a glance. When I asked who it was, she shrugged and said, "Group chat. Work stuff." Something about the way she said it, clipped and bored, like the question itself annoyed her, stuck with me. Since when did she avoid even looking at her notifications? After that, I started noticing everything. She was always losing things. Hair ties, earrings, receipts, little objects that somehow ended up in strange places. Once I found a lipstick in the glove box of her car, a shade I'd never seen before. When I asked her about it, she blinked and said, "Oh, I was looking for that. Thought I left it at the office." She said it like it was nothing. But her voice had a new edge, a quiet defensiveness tucked under the smile. Then there was the lingerie tag. It showed up one Thursday buried in the lining of her coat pocket. Still crisp. Still attached to the little plastic thread they used to secure it. I found it while grabbing her jacket off the hook. She was heading to Atlanta that weekend for a team alignment offsite, her words, not mine. When I showed it to her, she didn't even blink. "Oh, that," she said, laughing. "It's for Kara's bridal shower. We're doing one of those silly lingerie games. You know, everyone brings something ridiculous. I haven't even wrapped it yet. Didn't know Kara was getting married. It's a sh*TG*N thing," she said quickly, unzipping her overnight bag. "She met some guy on a wine tour last year. Anyway, it's harmless. Trust me." And maybe that's the most dangerous part, she knew how to say the right things. She said them in the right tone, with the right smile. Just enough to make me feel like I'd be the jerk for pressing her on it. But something about her changed after that Atlanta trip. She came home later than planned. Her flight was delayed, she said. She looked exhausted, but not in the worn-out way I expected. Her skin was flushed, her hair a little disheveled. Her suitcase looked like it had been packed in a hurry. And there was this disconnect. Like she was present, but just barely. Like she was playing the role of my wife, not actually living it. That night, when she climbed into bed next to me, she curled up and closed her eyes like she couldn't wait for the day to be over. I reached over, placed a hand on her waist. She didn't move away, but she didn't lean into it either. She just stayed still, like a statue. We didn't have S*X that night. We hadn't in a while. And when we did, it felt more like an obligation than anything else. Mechanical, efficient. No warmth, no softness. Like she was crossing a task off her list. And I tried to tell myself it was the stress, the travel, the projects she was constantly chasing. But deep down, I knew. I knew the difference between distance and disinterest. And this wasn't just stress anymore. It was disconnection, deliberate and sharp. The next morning, I waited for her to leave, then went downstairs and sat in the kitchen, staring at her half-drunk coffee mug. I don't know what I was expecting. Some sort of revelation, maybe. An emotional flare-up that would clarify everything. But all I felt was numb. So I did something I hadn't done before. I opened her laptop. It was a long sh*T. I didn't even know if it was still logged in. But it was. Gmail was open. Not many new messages, mostly work-related stuff. But she'd recently cleared her inbox. I checked the trash. Empty. Then I checked her calendar. Everything was blocked out. Color-coded events titled Meeting, Strategy, Deep Work, Ops Sync. But something stuck out. A recurring appointment on Fridays, 2:30 to 4 p.m., labeled only E2C, Internal Alignment. I Googled E2C. Nothing. I checked the travel folder. There were email confirmations for hotel stays, all legit-looking Marriott chain or business class flights. But one of them had a discrepancy. She had a booking for a weekend in Boston. A 2-night stay Friday through Sunday. I remembered that trip. She told me it was a 1-day conference, that she'd be back Saturday night. But the return flight was booked for Sunday at 6:15 p.m. I clicked on the itinerary again and again, hoping I had it wrong. I didn't. And that's when it really sank in. The version of my life I had been living wasn't real. Not all of it. Not anymore. There were parts of it that had already collapsed. I just hadn't been informed yet. Over the next few days, I found myself becoming quieter. Not withdrawn exactly, just calculating. I listened more closely when she talked, paid attention to when she charged her phone, how often she left the room for calls with the team. She'd say things like, "Sorry, I have to hop on something real quick," then disappear into the bedroom for 30 minutes. She never used to take calls in there. Not until recently. One night, I woke up to the sound of her typing. I squinted toward the glow of her phone. She was texting fast. Eyes locked in. She didn't even notice I was awake. I turned over, pretended to shift in my sleep. She froze for a second, then dimmed the screen. I wanted to ask her right then. I wanted to sit up and say, "Who is he?" But instead I said nothing. Because I needed to be sure. Because if I was right, if she was doing what I thought she was doing, then I wasn't just dealing with a broken marriage. I was dealing with someone who had gotten very good at lying to my face. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I wanted clarity. And maybe, part of me still hoped I was wrong. That this was just some weird, extended misunderstanding. That I'd dig through her digital life and find nothing but Zoom links and Pinterest boards for our anniversary. But hope is a funny thing. It hangs around even after it's outlived its purpose. That Saturday, she told me she was meeting an old colleague for brunch. Just catching up. Nothing major. She wore a soft gray sweater, loose curls, minimal makeup. Casual enough to pass as effortless. But polished enough that I knew she cared who'd be looking at her. She kissed me on the cheek. "Don't wait up. I might do some shopping after." I nodded. An hour later, I got an alert on my phone. Motion detected at the cabin. Our lakeside place. The one we hadn't used since late fall. We kept it mostly for long weekends, quiet, no neighbors. She had a key. So did I. I opened the feed. And there she was. Jenna. My wife. Stepping out of her car, holding a bottle of wine and a takeout bag. She glanced behind her. A man followed. Tall, well-dressed. I couldn't see his face. But I saw enough. They walked up the porch together. She unlocked the door. They stepped inside. The camera caught the door swinging shut. Then silence. I didn't move. I just watched the still image on my screen. Porch lights flickering, trees swaying gently in the background, and I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't even betrayal. It was confirmation. The kind that burns slow and deep, like a fuse finally reaching the charge. And I knew then, this wasn't the kind of wound you talk your way out of. This was the kind that changes the entire shape of your life. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I lay on the couch in complete stillness. The living room dark except for the soft blue blink of the modem and the glow of the paused security cam feed on my phone. Jenna's car was still in the frame, parked in front of the cabin like a monument to what I now understood was real. I kept watching that still image, hoping I'd see some detail that would change the meaning. A misinterpretation, a reason to doubt myself again. But the longer I stared, the more impossible that became. She was there, with him, and she'd gone out of her way to lie about it. No slip-up, no forgetfulness. This wasn't clumsiness, it was choreography. I scrolled back through the security footage, frame by frame. There wasn't much, just her car pulling in. The trunk popped open, a weekend bag. She laughed at something he said. Her shoulders rolled back as she handed him the wine. They moved like people familiar with each other's rhythms. No hesitation, no awkwardness. This wasn't new. This had been happening long enough for comfort to take root. At one point, he touched the small of her back as they walked up the steps. It was nothing. Everything. That little gesture told me all I needed to know. They stayed inside for the rest of the night. No one left. Lights came on, then off one by one. Bedroom last. I set my phone down. My heart wasn't racing anymore. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't even sad. There was a strange stillness in my chest, like the part of me that had been fighting to believe in her just stopped. And for the first time, I didn't try to rescue that belief. I let it die. When Jenna came home the next morning, she was wearing the same gray sweater and jeans she'd left in. Her hair was up in a bun, eyes hidden behind sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She came through the door like nothing had happened, humming something soft and tuneless, carrying a new bag of skincare products from a boutique she claimed to love. She kissed me on the cheek. "I grabbed you a protein bar," she said, holding it up. "The kind with those almonds you like." I took it, said thanks, looked at her for a second too long. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yeah," I said, "just tired." She smiled. "Same." And that was it. She went upstairs to unpack, or pretend to. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the protein bar like it was a peace offering from another planet. The scary part? I probably could have gone on like that. A version of me, the me from 6 months ago, might have ignored it, swallowed it, found a way to rationalize the whole thing. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I didn't tell her what I knew. Not yet. I didn't accuse. Didn't demand anything. I just watched her. I watched how easily she slid back into her role. How naturally she filled the silence with casual chatter about traffic, shopping, a new Netflix docuseries she thought we'd like. I nodded in all the right places, laughed once or twice, but inside I was gone. That night, I waited until she fell asleep, or pretended to, then sat in the guest room with the door closed and opened my laptop. I started with the obvious: email. Her personal Gmail account was still logged in on the browser. I'd never checked it before. We weren't the kind of couple who needed to, or at least that's what I used to think. There wasn't much in the inbox. She'd deleted a lot recently, maybe as a habit, maybe on purpose. But she hadn't cleared the drafts. There were 2. One of them was blank. The other was half-written, time-stamped 3 days ago. "I wish I could tell you I didn't feel anything, but I do. When I'm around you, it's like I'm allowed to exhale. I don't know what that means yet. I just know that when I go home, I feel like I'm wearing someone else's life." She hadn't addressed it. No name, no context. But she'd typed it in the cabin, I was sure of that. It was still saved in her drafts folder, like some part of her wanted it found. Next, I checked her location history. Turns out she'd been to the cabin more than once in the last month. 2 other Saturday afternoons. Both times she claimed to be at yoga or meeting up with a cousin who lived in the suburbs. I remembered those days. How she came home with nothing but an empty water bottle and excuses that didn't need to be convincing. Because I hadn't been asking questions. I should have been. Then I opened her photo backup. The folder was mostly normal. Vacations, dog pictures, work events. But buried halfway down, out of sequence with the others, was a set of 10 images, clearly taken on a different phone and synced accidentally. They weren't graphic. Nothing explicit. But they didn't need to be. In one, she was standing on the cabin's back deck, holding a glass of red wine, head thrown back in laughter. He was out of frame, but his hand was in the sh*t, reaching toward hers. Another showed their legs tangled on a blanket near the fire pit. A bottle of rose beside them, half empty. Her sandals discarded in the corner. In one photo, she was wearing his jacket. I saved them. Quietly. Made a new folder on an encrypted drive. Marked the date. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there for a long time, staring at a frozen moment of my wife with a man I didn't know, someone who clearly knew her in a way I hadn't in months. And the truth hit me all at once. She didn't just cheat. She left. She moved on emotionally before I had a chance to catch up. She'd repurposed a space we'd once called ours, that cabin where we watched thunderstorms roll over the lake, where we slow-danced barefoot to old playlists, and she gave it to someone else. Without permission. Without remorse. The next morning, I didn't confront her. I made her coffee. I folded laundry. I kissed her on the forehead as she left for work. And that afternoon, I drove to the cabin. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I wanted to see it for myself, the scene of the crime, if you want to call it that. Or maybe I wanted to reclaim something before it became permanently his. The place was quiet. Cold. Inside, everything looked untouched, but only if you didn't look closely. The throw pillows on the couch were arranged in a way Jenna never left them. There was a coffee mug in the sink that wasn't part of our usual set. The bottle of wine she'd brought was still on the counter, a different label than what we usually bought. In the bedroom, one of her earrings sat on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, then turned around and walked outside. The lake was still half frozen, spring trying to break through. It felt symbolic. Or maybe that's just how I wanted to see it. A frozen thing waiting for clarity. That night, I started building a folder on a separate email account. I uploaded everything, the photos, the camera footage, the message drafts. I logged the calendar discrepancies, copied receipts, and even noted the makeup she only wore on weekends now. It wasn't revenge I was planning. It was protection. A kind of self-defense. When Jenna came home again, she was herself. Smiling. Chatty. Telling me about a pitch she nailed, a barista who remembered her order, a woman at work who got engaged and wouldn't stop talking about the ring. I nodded. Said all the right things. But the whole time I knew. She was building a life outside of ours. And I had finally stopped making excuses for it. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come with a crash. Sometimes it arrives silently, like water soaking into wood, swelling it until one day it just splits apart. That's what it felt like. Not a fire. A rot. And once I saw it for what it was, I stopped waiting for confrontation. I stopped hoping for an apology. I stopped wondering who she was when I wasn't looking. Because I already knew. So I did the only thing that made sense to me. I started planning my exit quietly. No grand speeches. No slammed doors. No messy scenes. Just steps. One after the other. Small, deliberate, final. It started with an email account. A new one. Clean. Unconnected to any social logins, subscriptions, or devices we shared. I used it to back up everything, the photos, the screenshot ts, the cabin security footage, timestamps, email drafts, travel receipts. I created a folder labeled reference and nested another beneath it labeled if needed. I wasn't sure who the needed was for yet. Lawyer. Employer. Or maybe just myself if she ever tried to rewrite the story. Then I opened a new bank account. I chose a different institution, one with no branches near our neighborhood, no chance of running into someone who might know us. I transferred a modest amount at first, just enough to test the waters. Then, over a few weeks, I began funneling more into it. Bonuses. Side income. Anything that wouldn't trigger a joint alert. At the same time, I started unthreading myself from our shared digital life. Streaming services? I opened new accounts. I changed the passwords on the ones we used together and removed her devices without telling her. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she thought it was a glitch. I let her think that. Our grocery app? Cancelled. Replaced with a personal one. Cloud storage? I created a new vault. Moved everything personal over. Photos from my childhood, scanned documents, medical history, old journals, anything that was mine, I reclaimed digitally first. Then I tackled our devices. My phone was already fingerprint protected, but I updated the Face ID too, removed hers. Subtle. She never checked. My laptop had 2 accounts now, one visible, one hidden. The second one contained every record I'd collected, plus PDFs of our joint assets and her expense reports from past business trips, a trail I'd only just started tracing. One night while she was asleep, I checked our shared credit card statements. Line by line. A few charges stood out. Uber rides to neighborhoods she never mentioned. Boutique purchases that didn't match anything in her home. Hotel bar tabs posted under amenities, places she claimed to be passing through, never staying in. The totals weren't enormous, but the patterns were, and the inconsistencies stacked up like kindling. I documented everything. Not because I needed revenge. Because I needed to be free. I started spending more time out of the house too. Not dramatically, just enough to get her used to my absence. Long walks. Gym at odd hours. Weekend errands I didn't specify. Sometimes I went to a coffee shop 2 towns over and just sat with my laptop staring at nothing. Other times I drove to a storage facility I'd quietly rented in cash. It wasn't big. Just enough space for a few suitcases, a box of documents, my favorite records, a backup hard drive, a few sentimental things I didn't want to leave behind. Things I'd packed gradually like someone preparing for a trip they hadn't booked yet. It felt surreal, moving parts of my life into a climate-controlled unit while my wife messaged someone else under the blanket we once shared. But in a strange way, it gave me a sense of calm. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Jenna didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. She still played the part well, maybe too well. She'd text me random compliments, ask about dinner plans, show me TikToks she thought were funny. But it all felt performative now, like muscle memory. Like she was trying to keep the wheels turning on something she'd already jumped off of. There was one night, though, that gave me pause. She came home with flowers. Just handed them to me like it was a Tuesday and said, "You've been so good to me lately. I feel like I've been distant and I want to do better." I looked at her, genuinely unsure if this was part of the script or a glitch in the matrix. She seemed sincere. Her voice was soft. Her eyes held mine longer than usual. But it didn't matter. Because the foundation was gone. And I knew what she didn't. I was already gone, too, just still sleeping in the same house. I thanked her. Kissed her on the forehead. Made her a drink. And that night, while she watched TV, I scanned the receipt tucked inside the bouquet paper. She'd bought them on her way home from work, along with a bottle of wine, a scented candle, and 2 gourmet meal kits labeled Date Night Special. I knew exactly who the candle and wine were for. And it wasn't me. I saved the receipt in my folder. Just in case. Over the next week, I made a few final moves. I got in touch with a friend from college who now lived 3 states away. He worked for a startup and mentioned they were looking for someone with my background. Remote. Flexible. Clean slate. We had coffee. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. "I'm looking for something quieter," I said. "Something new." He offered to put in a word. That same afternoon, I toured a 1-bedroom apartment near a small lake in his town. It was nothing special, but it had high windows, hardwood floors, and no history. I signed a 6-month lease using my new email and a forwarding address from the storage facility. No one knew where I was going. Not even her. Not yet. The last thing I did was visit my parents. Just for a weekend. I told Jenna I needed space to work on a project and wanted to disconnect. She didn't argue. She barely looked up from her laptop. While I was there, I left a sealed envelope with my father, labeled simply, "To be opened if something happens." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a backup plan and anchor. Inside was a copy of the storage key, my new account logins, and a brief explanation of what I discovered. No rage. Just facts. When I returned Sunday night, Jenna greeted me at the door in one of my t-shirts. Hair damp. Smile warm. "Missed you," she said. I said it back. But what I didn't say, what I would never say again, was that I trusted her. Because that part of me was already packed in a box, locked in storage, waiting for the day I wouldn't have to lie anymore. I was almost out. And she had no idea. I used to think power came from being loud. From taking up space, forcing answers, demanding truth. But it doesn't. Real power is silent. It walks in calmly, says very little, and turns the room upside down with nothing more than presence. That's what I carried into that cafe on Thursday afternoon. I had chosen the place carefully, not trendy, not corporate. Just quiet. Neutral ground. A place with enough privacy to say what needed to be said and enough light to make it all feel exposed. Jenna's boss, Mitchell, arrived on time. I stood to shake his hand like we were just 2 professionals catching up over coffee. I'd met him once before, briefly, at a holiday party. The kind of man who gave firm handshakes, told polite jokes, and smelled faintly of cedar and ambition. He smiled like he didn't know why he was there. That would change soon. We sat down. I waited until the server dropped off our drinks before I opened the folder. Inside, copies of Jenna's expense reports. Her travel itineraries. Camera stills from the cabin. Timestamped Uber rides to unapproved destinations. A credit card receipt from a hotel bar 2 blocks from where she claimed to be leading workshops. One particularly telling reimbursement form labeled Internal Strategy Dinner, itemized with 2 entrees and a wine pairing for 2. Mitchell looked down at the documents, then up at me. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I said calmly. "But I thought it was important that you see how company resources are being used." He blinked slowly. "Is this about Jenna?" "It's about misrepresentation," I said. "About travel charged as business when it wasn't. About confidential data that may have been discussed in very non-secure environments. About your brand and your liability." I wasn't bluffing. I'd done the research. Her role, a hybrid between strategy and client development, gave her access to sensitive market intel and vendor contracts. If she'd been discussing anything with this guy Chris outside official channels, that alone could sink a deal. Mitchell flipped through the pages again, slower now. His face stayed composed, but the shift was visible. His shoulders pulled back. His gaze sharpened. "And what do you want me to do with this?" "That's up to you," I said. "I'm not threatening anything. I just think leadership should be aware before making decisions about client-facing promotions, travel approvals, or discretionary spending. Especially when personal entanglements complicate judgment." Mitchell set the folder down. He took a breath. "Are you divorcing her?" I didn't flinch. "That's personal. But I won't be part of the cover-up." We sat in silence for a moment. I let him process it. He wasn't stupid, he understood the implications. Not just for Jenna, but for the company. The tone of the meeting shifted. We weren't 2 men casually talking over espresso anymore. He cleared his throat. "Is she aware that you've compiled this?" "No," I said. "And I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention it. At least not yet." "Why?" "Because I'm not done leaving." That's when I saw her. Out of the corner of my eye at the front of the cafe. She walked in holding her phone, purse over her shoulder, eyes scanning for a place to sit. And then she saw us. Mitchell. Me. A manila folder between us. Her expression froze like someone had hit pause on her face. For one long second, she didn't move. Then she did. Slowly, carefully, she stepped backward. But not fast enough. Our eyes met. Locked. And in that exact moment, something changed between us, a complete reversal of gravity. She'd always thought I was the passive one. The quiet partner. The guy who smiled and nodded and let things go. She had mistaken silence for weakness, composure for naivety. But now she saw me for what I had become, dangerous. Because I wasn't yelling. I wasn't begging. I wasn't unraveling. I was building something behind her back, the same way she hid behind mine. Mitchell followed my gaze. He turned and spotted her just as she slipped back outside. Neither of us said anything. He picked up his cup and took a long sip. "Well then," he said softly. "That explains some things." I didn't respond. He flipped the folder shut. "You have my number if anything changes." We stood. Shook hands again. He left without finishing his coffee. I stayed behind, ordered a croissant I didn't want, and sat in the corner for another 20 minutes, watching the reflection in the cafe glass for any sign of her return. She didn't come back. Instead, I got a text 2 hours later. "Jenna, what were you doing with Mitchell?" I let it sit. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then longer. Another one came. "Can we talk?" Still, I said nothing. By the time I got home, she was already there, in the kitchen, pacing. "Can we talk?" she asked again. I shrugged off my jacket, hung it on the hook. "You're home early." She crossed her arms. "I saw you with Mitchell." "What were you doing?" I gave her a blank look. "Catching up." "That's not funny." I didn't mean it to be. Her jaw tightened. "Did you tell him something?" "About me?" "I don't know," I said. "Did I need to?" She froze. And there it was, the first crack in her voice, the first real fear I'd heard from her in weeks. Not anger. Not guilt. Fear. "What did you say to him?" she asked quietly. "Only what he needed to know." She tried to smile. "You're being cryptic." "No," I said, stepping past her. "I'm being careful." That night, she hovered around me more than usual. Made dinner. Turned the music lower. Sat beside me on the couch with a throw blanket draped over both our legs like some kind of domestic charm offensive. But I wasn't playing anymore. The dynamic had shifted and she knew it. The power she'd held, her control of the narrative of what I did and didn't know, was gone. She had spent months creating a version of herself that only existed outside my view. But now the walls of that second life were closing in. She had no idea how far my reach extended, what I'd documented, what I'd shared, who else might be watching. And that uncertainty? It terrified her. The next morning I got up early. Made coffee. Cleaned the counters. Checked the locks. She came down in leggings and a hoodie, looking casual, like nothing had happened. But her eyes kept flicking toward me, watching. Waiting for me to speak. I didn't. I just smiled, poured my coffee, and said, I've got a few errands today. She nodded. Do you want me to come with? No, I said, stepping toward the door. I've got it. The truth is, I was going back to the storage unit. I was pulling the final box. The one with the key to the new apartment. The one with the backup hard drive. The one with the goodbye note already written. Because while she was busy trying to repair an illusion, I was already gone. I just hadn't closed the door yet. The next morning, I made her breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee just the way she liked it. We talked about nothing in particular. She smiled. I smiled. And then I told her I had errands to run. That was the last time she saw me. My storage unit was already empty. My new apartment across state lines was ready. Job remote. Address private. I left no breadcrumbs. In the drawer beneath her vanity mirror, I placed a single envelope. Inside, no blame, no emotion. Just the facts. I know. I saw. I'm not staying. Not out of hate, just peace. I need my life back. And with that, I walked away. No goodbye. No more pretending. Just the clean quiet of freedom. Weeks passed. One message came through my new number. I never read it. Now, my days are simple: morning walks by the lake, handwritten journal entries, coffee and silence. People here know my name but not my past. And that's how I like it. Sometimes I wonder what she tells people, what version of us she keeps alive. But I don't wonder long. Because for the first time, I'm not part of someone else's performance. I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living wholly, quietly, finally, on my own terms.